All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the studio this evening where tonight I'm going to be painting this beautiful little puffin. I don't know why I want to paint a puffin. Quite honestly, I've been wanting to paint one for a while, and a couple of challenges for me getting into this, but I decided to sit down and finally do this, and I think it turned out very well. Let me talk you through what I'm doing here. So the white on his chest, I want to have a little mix of some warms and colds in there. So the grayish color at the top that I've put on is just a mix of a little Payne's gray and a little bit of ultramarine blue. Same with the little feathers on his legs there. A nice mix of ultramarine and Payne's gray. And then just to warm up some of the other bits, a little bit of yellow ochre just to warm things up. And there you go, quick as that. We've got his white belly painted. We will have to come back and we'll enhance that color a little bit as that paint dries and enlightens a little bit. We'll come back to it, but for now, I think it looks great. It's a nice start. Now we need to paint the white on his face, and I'm pre-wetting that whole area. What I want to happen is for the paint to go on and give me a little help by helping to spread that paint around. And again here, a little bit of blue, kind of at the top, towards his forehead. And that gray is just neutral tint, nothing else. Kind of a little bit where his chin would be and a little bit where his crow's feet would be. I think it's a nice start to getting some texture and dimension on his face. And now I'm going to move on to painting his feet and his legs. And in order to do that, I'm going to mix a little bit of Pyrrole red with a little bit of azo orange. And it develops a beautiful, warm red color. And while I'm doing that, let me tell you, the paper that I'm using is Fabriano Studio watercolor paper. The brushes that I'm using are King Art brushes. I'm using the 90-20 series. These are pointed round brushes, synthetic Takalon fiber in them. And the paints that I'm using are my M-Gram paints. I love my M-Gram paints. I've been using them for quite a while now, and they serve me very well. So now I'm going to paint the dark on this guy, and on first blush you could look at this puffin and say all of the feathers are black, but I don't like using black as black. I think it in many instances just kills the color and puts dead spots in your painting. It doesn't make things quite as vibrant as they could be. So instead I'm mixing my own dark. I'm using a combination of sepia, neutral tint, and Payne's gray. And if I want it to be a little cooler, I can add a little bit more Payne's gray to it. If I want it to be a little warmer, I can add a little bit more sepia to it. But in general, that will give me a nice dark color with a little bit of life to it. And that's what I'm looking for. I also am putting this on fairly thin. I know I'm going to be coming over and putting at least one more layer on this, so I don't want this to get too thick on here, but I do want to get one entire layer of this same color on all of his back feathers. So that's what you see me doing, just filling in some feathers here. Nothing more than that. And taking a little care to paint kind of where the black feathers would overlap with the white feathers. I want to make sure I don't have just a flat edge there, just painting where I think there would be a gap, leaving a little gap. Where I think there's full color, just painting full color. Now I do turn my page quite a bit. I never learned to paint by merely leaving my painting in one position. I'm a self-taught artist, and one of the things I've always done is turned my page to make it easier and move it. I quite often will move my painting around my desk in order to affect the orientation of the subject that I'm painting. So if it turns around, just bear with me for a little bit. I always do return to center, just like it is now. Okay, so giving a second layer to his legs and feet here. All right, leaving a little area for some highlight there. Maybe there's a little bit of sun on the front of that leg. I don't want to cover up all of the color that I've put down in that first layer. And doing the second thing, or doing the same thing, I mean, on his foreleg here, and a little bit of area on this one. That's a highlight. And right on down to his toes, wrapped around the edge of this little rock, and you can kind of see that now. He's just standing on that. Oop, had a little bit of a bleed out of that area. Now I'm looking at the white on his chest here, and I just want to enhance that dark color a little bit. I don't want it to totally take away from being white. I don't want to add so much color, but just a small enhancement there. All right, and same thing down on his legs. I'm going to do the same thing with the warm colors on his chest and stomach also. There we go. Just trying to create a little bit more depth and definition in there by having those dark areas next to some light areas and developing that depth. Okay, so now it's time to really take a let's let's take a look at his beak up here. And his beak is really unusual. There's a dark area that pretty much matches the dark on the rest of his feathers on his back. And then there's some really vibrant areas that kind of match the orange and reddish color on his legs. So as we go forward, I'm going to be continuing to use those colors and keep a little harmony within this painting. All right, just mixing a little bit of color off scene. And we're going to come back and try to paint some of these little fishies in his mouth. Now, for the fish, I've chosen a slightly different tact with this. This is a mix of turquoise and Payne's gray. I'm trying to be aware of the fact that these fish can get pretty dark pretty quickly. So I don't want to put on a great saturation of color. I want them to kind of be a bit brighter. Also with the understanding that I'm probably going to have to come back and put another layer of paint on these to get them to look exactly like I want. There they are. They're a little blue. I'm not sure why I picked up that brush, but the fish are a little blue in his mouth. We'll adjust that color coming up soon, and it'll work out just fine. Now I'm going to drop in just a little color on his eye. Normally I like to wait until the end because I don't want the eye to tell me what the animal is feeling. I just have the belief that you should paint the animal and then at the end put the eye on, because that eye starts to give the animal a lot of character. And if you put it on early and you paint, for instance, an angry eye, then you will definitely start to paint the rest of the painting kind of with an angry stance. But in this instance, his eye is black. Okay, so now I think it's time to start adding some dimensionality and to start bringing out some of the feathers on the back of this puffin. So I'm going to mix up a bit of that same color, maybe a little stronger. And again, this is sepia mixed with neutral tint, mixed with a little bit of Payne's Gray, to make mine, in reality, a neutral dark. It's not black by any means, but it is a dark. We can use it as a black. But I would rather do this than use a black, which maybe doesn't have quite as much interest to it as I'd like. And I just put a tiny little bit of ultramarine underneath. And now that we've got some darks on his tail feathers, let's come up and give some underneath his chin and on the back of his neck. And we'll take this, down to his shoulder. Just trying to be really careful about painting around the little fishies and around any of the feathers that I had previously painted in. It's just there, and going to allow that to blend out pretty smoothly. I'm sure we'll have to come back and put another layer on top of this to make this even darker. But there you go, just blending this way out. It's starting to look good. I like the black on his tail feathers down there. I like the dark underneath his chin. Once we start defining a few more really dark areas, I think this is really going to start to come to life. Right up on his head. There we go. That black doesn't go all the way over. There's some highlight coming from the back side of him a little bit, so I don't want to just put a stripe of black right on his head. That's probably not what I want to do. And then we've got some flight feathers right down here that probably need to be defined ever so slightly. There's one. We've just defined the underside of one feather. Quick as that. That was pretty simple. I don't know if I'm going to wish I had left that a little extra dark, but I took a little bit of extra water off of there. That would just prevent it from developing a back run on it. Okay, so take a deep breath and let's look at it. And what do we need to go to next? I think we need to continue to develop his feathers on his legs. There we go. Just painting around some of the lighter areas, adding a little bit of darker area under there. Maybe that's in shadow a little bit. And then we can come up and paint some more on his beak. I'm going to leave a few little lines on the beak at this point. I'm going to paint around a few areas. You might just be able to see a little bit there. In addition to having a nice red beak, there are some wonderful orangey yellow stripes on that. And I want to give them a little bit of room. So I've just painted around that a little bit. And then right where his beak and his face meet, I don't know what that is called. Just putting a little bit of yellow ochre on there to denote that line. Yeah, I'm looking at his face, and I would like a little bit more definition in there. So I'm going to come back and enhance our colors just a little bit. There's one. This is just neutral tint, just as it was before. Nothing else to that. And making sure that moves all the way around, allowing that water to help us out. We just pre-wet that. Up here, a little bit bluer, not too much, but a little bit bluer up there. There we go. And one right next to his eye. There it is. Just wanted to make sure that area is wet so that color would melt into the rest of the water and spread itself out and give us a nice, interesting shape. Okay, I like where his head is at this point in time. You can see some real definition in that. It looks pretty 3D to me. Oh, and we'll move on to the next step. I'm not sure what I'm doing with my hands here, but we're going to move on to the next step, and that should be adding some color onto his back, or it's going to be enhancing the fish that are in his beak. And so here we go. Mixing this color up. And again, the basic colors that I use for these fish are turquoise with Payne's gray. And I had previously drawn all of these fish in, and so now I'm just going to put in some lines where there's a little dark. They all have like a dark line on their back, right? I guess that's so other fishies have a hard time seeing them. But I'm going to put that little line on there. We'll blend this out a little bit, just like that, and we'll see how this looks going forward. I don't want to totally take away that dark by blending it, but I do want to blend it a little bit. Just like that. It's pretty good. Right in the center of this mass of fish that is in his beak. We probably don't need to define too much. A couple of lines here and there would probably be sufficient. I'm just feeling with the back of my hand to see what's wet and what's dry on his head. And I'll move back into his beak and enhance this color even a bit more. All right, I'm going to drop some yellow in there. Really hard to see, but there you go. And we'll add a little bit of red onto that later on to really make that beak pop. obviously I needed to point at something or two somethings. There's a little bit of the back half of his face on that back side. That was just white, but I had drawn it in. I wanted to give it just a little color, is what you've seen me do there. Waiting for everything to dry. And now I want to define this area, right? Going back in. And everything from his neck feathers below his head are distinctly different than his shoulder and wing feathers. And so I want to make sure that I can show that. And one of the things I can do to help with that is to darken up everything on his neck. Over here, being careful to paint around the feathers that I've previously defined. And I'm just going to blend that way out. Let that go out really nice and softly. There you go. There you go. It's going way out. Maybe just a little touch up there. And I like it. I like it. I like it. Redarkening around his head. The more I paint watercolors, the more I've learned layer upon layer upon layer. I used to try to paint so that I never had more than 3 layers in any part of my painting. I always thought that I could do everything in 3 layers. As a result, some of my paintings got a bit blotchy. The more I paint, the more I realize that a few extra layers here and there really will help with your layering, with your depth, with the translucency or transparency of your watercolors, and really, really help to make your paintings come alive a bit more. So here we are. I've got feathers on the back of him. They are quite dark, just like they are underneath his neck. And I want to represent that here. So I'm just dropping on some color for that. But I don't want the color to go up so high that it impedes upon those feathers with his neck. I said that I want these 2 colors to be distinctly different. There is kind of a line right there that you can just notice, just there. And I've got a little bit of texture, it looks like. Oh, I'm just going back into it. I've got a little bit of texture there on the feathers on his back. Not too much, but a little bit. And making a few dots. There you can see. That's not just a completely homogeneous color. That's going to come back to help us in the end, I think. I think that looks pretty nice. And we'll get those flight feathers. You can see that are the lightest of all right there. We're going to get those in just a second. While we've got this dark color all mixed up on our palette, let's go ahead and add a little bit more. There it is. I think he's really starting to come together. We continue to add and layer these colors on here, and the more we do this, the more this guy really is coming to life. That's nice. It's important right up here at the top that I not put too much dark all the way over the bridge of his nose or the bridge of his beak. There's some light that comes over there, and we want to allow some difference between the top of the beak and the darker areas down below. All these guys look like they have a little bit of makeup on or something. There's lines that seem to radiate out of their eyes. That's just all I've done there is put that little tiny line on. So he's really starting to come along in not too much time. We've got a couple of things we need to do yet. Those flight feathers, and probably take a little crack at that rock. See if we can't help that out a little bit. And also his eye. There's not a lot around this eye. It is pretty dark. So I'm going to put it on. And this eye, there is just a tiny little black in there. I don't always like to use black. As I've said, I don't use it for too much. I do have a small amount of it on my palette, and I think for the black of an eye is probably the best use for it. Okay, we've got these flight feathers down here that we need to define, and we're going to get those here in just a second. I believe there are 4 feathers there, 3 feathers that we are going to separate out from each other. Adding some extra color onto his beak here. Now that's that same color, but I've just added just the smallest amount of alizarin crimson in there to help make that pop out a little bit more. Alizarin crimson is such a strong color. And right around the edges of his beak, of his mouth, there's this beautiful orange patch where the skin is there. It allows him to flex his mouth. Oh, I'm thinking, do I need to do something to that area? That's nice and dark. Maybe that could be even darker. Do I need to do something? The light's coming through. Some of that in the back should be a bit darker. It's a bit damp at the moment. All right. Just maybe a little bit. That area underneath his tail should be pretty much in shade. So I'm going to darken that up a little bit. Not too much. We're coming close to the end of this one, so everything we do from here on out is touch up, just to make sure it looks exactly like we want. Mixing some color, bit of yellow ochre, bit of Payne's gray, bit of sepia. Let's make the side of this rock over here. I should probably throw a little bit of blue in there too. But it's just a rock that he's standing on. Actually, I hope that when you look at this rock or look at this painting, you don't even notice the rock, you notice the bird instead. And here I'm just defining these feathers in there. There you go. Look at that. All of a sudden, we've got a few feathers that have just popped out of nowhere. And that's kind of a cool thing. I do need to enhance that just a little bit more, I think. When I've got these fishies up here that need maybe a little attention, maybe, we'll just add a little extra to those. I think when all is said and done, I went just a little too dark on these fishies, but I don't think it is much of a distraction at all from the rest of the painting. I think they turned out nice. I just think I could have left them a little bit lighter. They would have popped a little bit more. but it's all good. There we go. You can clearly see them hanging right out of his mouth right now. Yep, still a little bit wet, a couple of those areas. I don't want to do too much too quickly. Another layer on his eye. Really enhance that. There it is. Leave a little highlight in there. I can always go back and put some white gouache on the top, but it is nice to leave your own highlight as you're doing it. We've got about a minute left in this video. You can see me just dropping in a few lines that are going to enhance what's already here. And this is that same red color, just made a little bit darker. Again, this color is Pyrrole red with azo orange. Trying to define these feet a little bit. These little tiny details, these small little details make a big difference. Those legs, those feet looked good before. Giving them that little extra dark makes them look even better. And then I really want to make sure that we can define these feathers, these little flight feathers. It's a little thing, it's going to make a big difference. The final painting, look at that. Look at that. And with that, I'm going to say thank you all for joining me in the studio this evening. Give a like to the video, hit the button down below, come back and see another video. I do live streams every Wednesday. I would love to see you then. Until then, everyone, thank you so much. Bye-bye.